Political strategists on both sides of the aisle are waking up to a stunning new reality in the Lone Star State, because a massive upset in a Texas special election has just sent a shockwave through the Republican Party that could completely reshape the narrative for the 2026 midterms. In a result that defies almost every conventional metric, Democrat Taylor Rehmet defeated Republican Lee Wambsgans by a staggering 14-point margin in a Fort Worth area district that Donald Trump carried by 17 points just 2 years ago. When you crunch the numbers, that represents a 31-point swing away from the GOP in a district that is home to nearly 1 million people, making it larger than your average congressional district and historically a stronghold of conservative power. This was not a tiny local race that flew under the radar. It was a battleground where the Republican candidate raised over $2.5 million compared to the Democrats' $400,000. And yet, the massive financial advantage was not enough to stop the bleeding. What makes this loss particularly alarming for the Republican establishment is that Donald Trump personally intervened in the final days, attempting to mobilize his base with multiple social media posts endorsing Wambsgans. But the data suggests his call to action fell on deaf ears. For the first time in a long time, Democrats actually outperformed Republicans on Election Day itself, winning 58% of the day of vote, which contradicts the usual trend where Republicans dominate in-person voting. This failure of the Trump endorsement to move the needle in a low-turnout special election exposes a critical vulnerability for the GOP, which is that the MAGA base simply does not show up when Donald Trump is not on the ballot, leaving the party exposed to energized Democrats and moderate voters who are shifting away from the hardline culture war politics that define the Wambsgans campaign.
The location of this upset is just as important as the margin, because Tarrant County is not just any county. It is a national bellwether that is home to major defense contractors and was once the epicenter of the Tea Party movement. For a Democrat to win here for the first time since the early 1980s signals that the suburbs are continuing to revolt against the current iteration of the Republican Party. This result injects a massive dose of hope into the Texas Democratic Party, which has been locked out of statewide office since the 90s, but now sees a viable path to potentially flipping a U.S. Senate seat in 2026, especially if the GOP primaries turn into a messy civil war between establishment figures and insurgents like Attorney General Ken Paxton. However, we have to look at this with a critical eye, because special elections are notorious for having low turnout and unique local factors that don't always predict the future. Only about 100,000 people voted in this runoff, compared to the millions who will show up in a general election, and the Republican candidate was arguably damaged by her previous controversial involvement in local school board battles that alienated moderate voters. Yet, even with those caveats, the trend line is undeniable because Democrats have been overperforming in special elections across the country by double digits ever since the 2024 election. If this 30-point swing in Texas is even remotely indicative of the national mood, Republicans are staring down the barrel of a catastrophic midterm cycle that could cost them control of Congress and shatter the myth of Texas invincibility.